I'm having a bit of a struggle finding the words to tell you how much I really, really like this movie without seeming like just like a gushing fanboy, which I hate. But it's, it's just one of those feelings that you have when you leave a movie, and it's just like, that was it. That, thank you very much. And that's the feeling that I had when I left the theater after seeing The Dark Knight Rises today. It met every expectation I could have had, and in many cases it went above and beyond the expectation that I had, or the hope that I had of what it might be. This is a really, really, really good movie. I mean, I've only seen it once. I haven't really had time to sit down with it and analyze it and get to know it and do all the fucking bullshit that movie people like to do with movies that they love. But I mean, after the first viewing, just at first blush, the instinctive reaction that I have is that it's better than The Dark Knight. That it's a great fucking movie. One of the main reasons, in fact, the main reason, I'll be honest with you, why I am feeling so good about it and why I'm thinking so highly of it and praising it as much as I'm about to praise it, is that it got to me. It hit me right here. Right in the bat symbol of the t-shirt. It just made me feel something. And as much as I have really, really loved The Dark Knight for the last few years, and much as I can just talk forever about my admiration for that film and how much I love everything about it, at the end of the day, the main reason why I would choose a film like Superman Returns over a film like The Dark Knight is that Superman Returns punches me in the chest. It makes me feel something. It gets a really deep emotional response out of me in a really primal, instinctive way that you can't really control and you can't really quantify in terms of analysis. And Dark Knight Rises did that for me. It made me feel like that. And it was not a perfect movie. It was not without flaws, and it was not without its shortcomings, and I'll talk about a few of those. But at the end, when the movie was over, when that final sequence had reached its completion and the last shot had cut to black, man, it had me. It had me. And that to me counts for a lot. It finished very strong, and it finished in a way that wasn't just impressive, it wasn't just cool, like where you turn to the person you're sitting next to and you go, oh man, that was awesome. It really, really made me feel something. It moved me. And that counts for a fuck of a lot with me. So before I get into the fulsome praise section of the review, I want to talk a little bit about some of the shortcomings of the film. There were times when the action sequences felt like they were running a bit long. The movie is about 3 hours long, and a lot of that is action, is explosions and shit flying around and chases and fights. And there were times where that felt like it was going a little bit long. And there's also something I noticed, because this film has a vast cast of characters. There are way more characters, like important characters, in Dark Knight Rises than there were in The Dark Knight or Batman Begins. And they all are there for a reason. I mean, that's a good thing. There aren't any extraneous characters. Everybody has something very important to do with the story. But the thing I noticed is, for some of them, their important stuff doesn't really happen until the last 45 minutes or so of the film. That's when they really, step up and become very, very crucial to the story. So to explain why they're kind of off screen for so long, the movie comes up with these ways of kind of writing people off. Like, for instance, there's a long stretch in the middle of the movie where Commissioner Gordon has been injured and he's just in the hospital for like an hour, and they keep coming back to him. Like they'll cut back from whatever Batman's doing or whatever Bane is doing, and they'll just check up on Commissioner Gordon in the hospital. And it's like, damn, he didn't look like he was hurt that bad. But it feels like they're just keeping him in the hospital because there's really nothing else for him to do right now. You know, and then once he gets out of the hospital, he's doing stuff. He has a really important role to play in the story. He needs to be there. His presence is very vital. But until the story reaches that point, he just kind of is, well, we'll just have him laying around in the hospital bed. It's great because it ends up adding up to more than the sum of its parts. It transcends its flaws. And there are some things in it that are really, like, it has the hoariest action movie cliche you can possibly have toward the end of the movie, which is the digital countdown, where there's this bomb that's going to go off and they're racing against time to stop this bomb. And there are these repeated close-ups of the digital timer. It's the hoariest action movie cliche you can possibly have. Those are some of the shortcomings of the film that jump out at me. As for everything else, I mean, the performances are outstanding. Everybody does such a good job. Michael Caine he really only has about 3 important scenes in this movie. He's not in it as much as he was The Dark Knight, but man, he kicks ass. He just really takes his little bits that he has as Alfred and invests such meaning and such emotion into them. Christian Bale, even though the Batman voice is still kind of distracting at times, it just outdoes himself. I think it's his best performance of the 3 Batman performances. The only thing about the Batman voice that always bothered me was why he uses it when he's talking to people that know who he is. And there's a little bit of that in this movie, where there are 2 or 3 scenes he has in the Batman costume with people who know that he is Bruce Wayne, and he's still talking to them like this. It's like, what, really? Would you really do that? But it doesn't spoil the movie for him. If anything, it's just something to think about afterwards and laugh and go, yeah, why would he do that? The big showpiece performance in the previous film was, of course, Heath Ledger as the Joker, and a lot of people have expressed a feeling of missing the Joker in this because it was so definitive in the previous film, and he really dominated The Dark Knight. And the main villain in Dark Knight Rises, Bane, is certainly not as colorful as the Joker was, and he's not as splashy, and it's not the sort of performance where you would see it and you would immediately start thinking, as you may have thought with Ledger's performance, like, wow, this is just a game changer. This is going to be an Oscar-worthy thing. This is going to make this guy's whole legend, this performance. Bane is not that kind of character, but at the same time, so I mean, you can't really compare the performances between Heath Ledger as the Joker and Tom Hardy as Bane, because they're doing very different things and they're very different characters. But at the same time, Hardy's turn as Bane is so good and so perfectly pitched for this movie. He does some things with his voice that I wasn't really expecting based on the trailer. I mean, everybody talked about how muffled the voice was in the trailers. You know, Bane would always be sort of talking like he was talking from the other side of a door because he has that mask on.
And he would always sort of talk like this, when Gotham is ashes, you have my permission to die.
And in the movie, he's much more sort of choked and pained. I mean, not to the extent that he seems like an invalid, but one of the reason why Bane wears the mask in the film is as an anesthetic, because he apparently has a chronic injury that would cause him to be in incredible pain if not for wearing this mask that constantly feeds him anesthetic gas. So he, and his voice, because you never see his mouth move and you see his eyes and you hear his voice, and that is basically the whole performance. You don't see 3/4 of his face for the entire movie. And the voice is very important. And the way he does the voice of giving him this constant sense of just calm and confidence, but yet whenever he speaks, there's also that little tiny choked quality, that little pained quality, or like maybe it's a little hard for him to get his breath sometimes, or there's a little hint of pain when he speaks. It's really well done and really very good at suggesting dimensions to Bane that aren't necessarily fully colored in the whole way. A lot of characters, as I said, and a lot of new characters to the series, Bane being the big one, and also Catwoman, Selena Kyle, played by Anne Hathaway, does a really good job. Really gives her, makes her a very formidable character, and there's this, she's a part of this trend that I'm seeing in superhero films lately, of really making sure that the female characters, the female heroes, are able to stand up for themselves and stand on their own 2 feet and beat the men up, and to try and sort of steer against that long-standing trend in superhero comics especially, and then that carried over into films as well, of this sort of sexist patriarchal attitude where the women have to be rescued. The women are there to be rescued. There's never really a scene in The Dark Knight Rises where it seems like Selina Kyle needs Batman to come to her rescue. I mean, there is a scene where they fight a lot of thugs together, and Batman does kind of show up at an opportune time. But by that point, we've seen that she's such an ass kicker and she's so smart that it's not as if she was, totally dead and then Batman showed up and saved the day. They're really treated very much as equals. And then there's John Blake, the Joseph Gordon-Levitt character, who's a detective who is sort of like the carrier of the torch for Batman when the movie begins. Who is the guy? He's still relatively young, and Batman has been gone for a very long time when Dark Knight Rises begins. And John Blake is like the guy who doesn't believe that Batman was the bad guy that he was made out to be at the end of The Dark Knight. And Blake's character too gets a payoff at the end that is sort of simultaneously something that you would have expected, but yet is done in a very unexpected, very innovative, original way. And it just and it really it figures very heavily into that finale that I mentioned. The last 5 or 10 minutes of the movie are just immensely satisfying, and in a way that isn't really found in the comic books. Like there have been last Batman stories written in the comics at various times throughout the character's history, and none of them have quite wrapped it up like this movie does. I mean, this is a final story. This is definitely Nolan's version of the last Batman story, and it is done in a way that is unique to this series, unique to this filmmaker and his take on the characters, and in a way that you can find pieces of in older Batman comics, but is never quite done the way it's done here. And it's again, I just can't tell you how satisfying the ending of this movie is. It really gets me right here. And even though I think they're probably going to go, I would imagine they're probably going to go reboot after this and just start completely over from scratch with the Batman franchise from this point on. You can sort of project using your own imagination into the future of what the future for these characters would be like if we did get to see them for another film. And it's a really exciting possibility. It leaves the story in a very, very exciting place, in a very fresh new place where you can't quite anticipate where it would go. And for that reason, I hope that we never quite see where it goes. I hope that it's just left at this, that another director isn't brought in to continue this particular story. I hope that they leave it where Nolan leaves it, especially with that final shot. If you haven't seen the movie, hopefully you'll see what I mean. If you have seen the movie, perhaps you agree. The final shot of the movie, the final shot of the Nolan Batman series is absolutely perfect. Some people might say that it's a little too on the nose. It's a little too literal, but goddamn, I loved it. I loved the ambition of the movie. I love the artistic ambition. I appreciate a filmmaker as talented as Nolan who sets out intentionally to make a great movie. Like, he consciously feels like he is saying, I want this to be a great movie. And it's an attitude that you don't see as often as I would like, especially in big commercial films like this, blockbuster films, where it feels like he's not just sitting down and going, okay, let's make a movie that's going to make a shitload of money. He's saying, let's make a great movie, a really great artistic statement that deals with themes, that says something substantial about these characters and about this story and about the culture that this film is a product of. And I feel like he's done that here, and I feel like he wanted to do that, and the result is just smashing. It's a great goddamn movie.